It's a nice day. I want to draw. Oh no! How do I use these devices? Someone on Instagram asked me if I could do a video on pen stroke and cross-hatching, so I'm gonna try and do just that. For that I have 2 pens here and also a set of pencils. I'm gonna take 4B and 6B pencils out. The rest I don't think will be that visible on the camera, other than the 8B. So let me start with pencils and then we'll talk about the pens in a second. Because mostly everybody starts out with pencils, and I also started out with a pencil as a kid. Funnily enough, as I did my industrial design studies, I really started only using pens and shied away from pencils. Until then I didn't want to use pens because obviously you can't make mistakes with pens, and that's why I enjoyed the pencils, because you can erase them. But during my studies at industrial design I really got used to working with pens, and I find it quite hard moving back to the pencil because my workflow was quite different. So, but in the end you can pretty much apply the industrial design sort of techniques to pencil drawings as well. So as you can see here, I drew a very light cube, and I'm going to do the adjustments to it just to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm gonna cut off its edges and give a slight chamfer to the those are edges as well. So I'm gonna cut off the tips and do chamfer to the edges, however you want to call it. I'm gonna just make it look a little bit more appealing and interesting and not so pointy and spiky, so you can't really hurt yourself with it. I'm gonna make the lower sides of this cube darker because of shadows, and also because some parts of it touch the surface that the box is sitting on, so that should be darker. And then the rest I will shade in 1 second. Alright, shading time. So, we all know that cross-hatching goes something like this. What's the good thing with a pencil is that if you really give it a tilt, you're not going to get almost any lines, but you get sort of a uniform shading. That's the nice thing about working with pencils, is that you can almost jump into creating values, and you're not forced to doing lines like you're forced to do with pens. And if you are patient enough, you can get a really nice and smooth and uniform shadow area, or let's say a darker value area. And then you can also go to a little bit lighter one. So this was the 4B. I'm going to go to a 2B, B2. Not actually B2, 2B, B2. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna shade this side slightly less, and then obviously you can also go to the darker, to the 6B was this one, and then you can say this is where the light is coming from, and here you don't necessarily have to stick to an accurate representation of the shadow. But what's good with the pencil again is because of how you can apply the pencil, you can make the shadow that's closer to the object darker. That's how it's supposed to be. And then as you move away from the object, you apply less and less pressure, and the shadow becomes lighter. And my problem is that I'm always very shy with making things dark and light. And I always end up, well, at least I always did when I was using more pencils, end up with very, very light pencil, and I don't want that to happen now as well. So I'm gonna go in with a 8B as well, to make sure that it's really nice and dark in the shadow area, and then we have this nice fading away. And I want to bring some of this darkness back here as well. And there's this, it's sort of an optical illusion as well, but down here, this area is going to be a little bit lighter because you have the light bouncing off the surface that the cube is standing on. So the edges of this cube, well, not the edges, but the area of this shadow side that is closest to the areas that are lit are going to seem a little bit darker because you have the contrast between the light and the dark. And there the dark seems darker and the light seems lighter. And the nice thing also with pencil, that you can come in with your finger and just smear it around a little bit if you want a bit more uniformity. There we go. There we go. And now, because this side is nice and dark, we can take a really light. I have just a B1 and the light is coming from up. So I'm going to just add a really soft touch to this side with the B pencil. There we go. I hope the camera does pick this up. And now we have three nice shades. Alright. Let's go to the pens. So I have my super cheap fine liner from Hema, and fine liners usually have this really dotty, thin end. You can't do too much with these. So if I would want to draw the same cube, so as you can see, if I want to draw some size darker, I just have to draw over them over and over again to make those darker. Or I would switch to a somewhat thicker fine liner. I think this is 0.1. I usually work with 0.05 to 0.2, and if you want something thicker, I also have a 0.4 and a 0.8. But the problem here is that there's not much variation of how you use this fine liner, and that's also why I usually like working with this or similar fine liners, because I have from the pencil era, when I was still drawing with pencils, that I explore a lot. So if I have a shape, I start just drawing lines, and then I start adjusting it, and I just explore that area even with my fine liner. And this seems a bit messy, but then if you come in with a thicker one towards the end, then you can really just outline what should be the main lines. Well, outline main lines, a bit of repetition there. But what I'm trying to say is you can really put emphasis on the strokes that are important and leave the rest, and the eye will filter out the ones that are important. But to return to the pen strokes, you can't do really much variation in strokes with this one. That is why I recommend the Papermates. These are really nice as well. But I'm a bit too lazy to go into the city to get these, because for these I have to go like, I don't know, 200 meters, not even that much. And there's a shop here. So the good thing about the Papermates, it has a really thin, so the tip looks something like this, right? This would be the tip of a Papermate. So it goes from really thin to quite thick, which means that I can draw like really nice and thin controlled lines, but at the same time I can go quite thick as well. So in that case I can think a little bit, visualize this in my head, and then draw the cube, and then I can easily use the same one, and I don't have to go over and over again, just once, and make these nice thick lines. And since we're with a Papermate or a pen in general, we can't do obviously these nice gradations. So that's when cross-hatching comes in. And important things to remember with cross-hatching is to try to stick to a direction. So you don't want to have somewhat of a more complex object. Let me draw something more complex. All right, let's say this is our complex object, and you don't want to, let's say the light is coming from here, and you really don't want to have different directions for the cross hatches, because that is just going to look a little bit silly and also busy in the end. And then we have sort of something like this here, and then we also have the body shadow here, which would be like this. So you can see yourself that just doesn't look bad. Doesn't look good. So it's always important, even if you have that super complex geography, to maintain that crosshatch that you once started. And then if I quickly replicate that one here, as ugly as it is, you can see that if I'm going to crosshatch everything into the same direction, it is already much more pleasing for the eye. There we go. So that is much more consistent shadow area and much more pleasing for the eye. It also takes away from the busyness of all of this. Sort of an exception for this is when what I like to call, I don't know what's it called, but I like to call it texture cross-hatching. So let's say we have maybe some sort of fashion designer bag. And I never drew a fashion designer bag in my life. I don't know why I just decided to do this. And please, if there's any fashion designers, I know this will be horrible, so please don't be angry with me. Okay, let's see. There's some sort of handle that can go together. Alright, so now I can make it a little bit thicker. It needs to be thicker. So, as I said, sort of exceptions to cross-hatching is when you want to indicate direction. So this is, if this is going sort of inwards, we're gonna do it inwards. And these sides could also be going inwards, but I'll make sure to fade them away, right? I'm going to make sure to slowly fade them away. And by fading away, what you can't do that nicely with pens, I usually mean you start out quite close, and then you start to put more and more distance between the lines, and that gives you this nice effect of fading away, right? And another thing, if you want to have, so this wasn't the texture crosshatch. The texture crosshatch is if you want to have some sort of texture here, and it's also in a dark. I like to do these, really just switching them up. And it's not a clear sort of, hey, this is this sort of texture, but it is just, it tells you that, oh, this it has a bite to it, the touch of this bag. So it has some sort of interesting bite to it. And never do the whole thing. So I really don't recommend doing the whole thing. I recommend doing one part, or maybe doing one or two parts. So you can also do a couple here, just to tell the eye that this texture will continue here as well, and then maybe one or two here. But you already see that it clashes with this, so try to stick to one or the other. If this information is not necessary here, you can just have also two drawings. You can have one drawing just from the side, where you see this sort of texture, right? And you can have one drawing from that angle, where you see how it's bent here. And then you can sort of explain how this will be working. So we have this, an important point for cross-hatching, and then we have the textured one, which can cause noise quite easily, visual noise. So watch out how you use this one. right? So you're gonna have really thick lines, and then you go into thinner and thinner ones. So it's basically similar to this one, but it has a little bit even more control with the thickness and thinness. Well, this was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. Consider subscribing if you like this content. And if you want more regular updates, follow me on Instagram, and wish you a great day. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.